Are you a manager who is eager to change the trajectory of your career? I have spent the last 23 years as a Fortune 50 leader learning from other industry leaders how to break free from limiting beliefs and habits. On the Might in Motion podcast, we focus on the 4 M's: motivation, momentum, mindfulness, and might. We bring you leaders from Fortune companies, doctors, and entrepreneurs. Their stories of living their own might in motion will inspire you to create your own action plan and achieve your goals. Welcome to Might in Motion.
Today's episode of Might in Motion is brought to you by Pantheon FM, Fortunes Magnified. Pantheon FM is changing the world through entrepreneurship. In this community, you will find everything you need to create, amplify, and monetize your world-changing business. Join us at pantheon.community/register/LAUA.
I am really pleased to bring to you today Barbe Chambliss. She is just such an inspiration. She spent 30 years doing personal interviews with 60 women throughout the world about how they are making peace, helping empower others to empower themselves into positions of respect and opportunity. She wrote a book recently highlighting 15 of those women called Women Peacemakers: What We Can Learn from Them. Tonight, we're going to talk more about her book and the lessons that she's learned and how you can apply those in your day-to-day life and career. Barb, welcome to Might in Motion.
Thank you for even thinking of having me. I'm glad to be here. Super glad.
Oh, I'm so excited. I'm an avid reader, so this is now on my list of the next book to go buy.
Okay.
Because the concept behind it is really inspirational. And sometimes as women, we end up in conflict. And to see women as being peacemakers is really cool. So do you mind just sharing with us how you came up with the idea of the book and some of the people you interviewed?
So if we go way back, I've been, without even realizing the trajectory, I've been interested in peace for ever since I was born. I was born 18 months after I was born. We blew up Hiroshima.
Okay. Yeah.
With my mom. And I don't know what you believe about energy, but being a little tyke during that time, I think it had something to do with me seeking out peacemaking later on. And then occupationally, I've done lots of different things, but the ones that led me down this path were, I've a trained mediator. That came because my husband and I got a divorce. We hated it. We were out of money and we got it mediated. And I went like, oof, this is cool. So I turned around and trained. I also have been a trauma therapist for 40 years. And then as a mediator, I kept realizing that like people would come to the mediation room and they'd be delighted that they got out of a mess with each other. And I'd go like, yep, we fixed this one, but they have no idea how they got here.
Yeah.
So I went like, how can I teach the mediation skills? So I taught over 500 or 600 kids in Western Colorado how to be mediators. And sometimes I taught their whole school system how to, so there's a language to mediation. There's some ways of thinking, and the little kids pick it up really fast. The lunchroom ladies, they get it pretty quick. And the bus drivers, the principal. So we would do Peace Place schools. And then I had an opportunity to get a Ph.D. And I wasn't even sure what I was going to study, but what came out of my mouth was peacemaking.
Yes.
And so I thought, you better believe yourself, go for it. And the committee, I had the best PhD committee ever. And when you do a PhD, you have to fill a gap in the literature. So I looked up peacemaking, and there was a fair amount of information on men, especially Nobel Peace Prize winners, but not on women. So I thought, great, I'll go for Nobel Peace Prize women. And I couldn't find them. They were in hiding. Aung San Suu Kyi, I mean, there aren't very many of them to begin with. I think there are only 9 of them or something like that. And Aung San Suu Kyi was in house arrest. I couldn't get to her. Rigoberta Menchú Tum from Guatemala was in hiding because it was so dangerous for her. And I went like, okay, so go at it again, Barb. And that meant ordinary women, not.
Yes.
And then very quickly, I learned that when I got ordinary women, they were doing extraordinary.
Yes.
And so the committee said, Barb, you better define what you mean by peace. Or how are you going to get the people to interview for your thing? And I said, good point. And I thought, well, if I'm going to interview around the world, I better not tie it very tightly to an English definition.
Mm-hmm.
So I've created a visual definition. So I would say to somebody, this is peace because it's equal. It's equal respect, it's equal opportunities, and it's equal reacting to each other. This is not peace. How do we do this here?
Right, right. So one hand kind of in front of the other like that.
If you do it this way, one hand's higher than the
Okay.
higher than the other. It's not peace because it's dominant and subordinate.
Yes.
So I would say to somebody, like the very first woman I ever interviewed, I went to a concert of 5 Irish musicians. I went backstage and I said, I'm looking for women in Ireland. If this is peace and this is not, do you know any women that are making this happen? And they went like, no, we're the musicians in the family. We have a sister who's a disc jockey in Dublin. Here's her telephone number. So I called a Fanula the next day and got 2 nominations. I mean, that's how random. And that's how I've interviewed 60 women now. And almost all of them have come through some sort of like momentary concept of what someone thinks would be a peacemaker. And just to let you know, Mariana, these women work very proactively. They don't march. They don't sit at the table and negotiate the end of war between Ukraine and Russia.
Right.
These are women that have just seen something that didn't feel fair.
Yes.
Or didn't feel just. And they thought, I'm just going to look into that. And that's how almost all of these women started. And they looked into it. And then a few other things that I'll mention in a minute, they went like, well, I really have grown to love these people. I'm going to stick with this. And that's how it becomes proactive and conscious. It's very different than the spontaneous act of peacemaking where, oh gosh, well, I will often say to an audience I'm talking to, pretend you're a 5th grader that's really popular, good at it. And you walk out of the lunchroom and you have a whole table of your buddies and you go sit at that table every day. But one day you're late, you look at the table and it's full. So you go to a place where there's room at the table and you meet this other kid. And and you have a pretty good conversation with him. And as you get up to empty your tray, the kid says, thank you for sitting here. Nobody has sat at this table all year. And you go like, right. I think as I've looked beyond my table, I've seen a kid sitting here all year. And so that 5th grader says, well, you know what? I had a good time talking to you. And you go out to the playground. That's all a very spontaneous act of peacemaking. Conscious act of peacemaking happens the next day when the popular kid walks out of the cafeteria, chooses which way to go to lunch.
Yes.
So these women, I mean, one of the things these women do is they wake up every day and they say, do I still want to do this? Have I got the guts and the motivation and the skills to keep up with this? And so many of these women have done things like completely save nations from extinction.
Wow.
No kidding. I mean, one woman was a Messiah. She's an American Mary Knoll nun.
Okay.
She was assigned, Mary Knoll nuns all teach out of the United States. She was assigned to Tanzania. So she went over there and taught, and she got to know some of the Maasai men because the women were all back and in the 7 hours away.
Right.
And somebody said, well, would you help us with a study? We're looking at the Maasai Nation and we're trying to look at their trends. So she helped, especially with the research on the education part. And she went like, they're going to die as a group, as a people. They are headed right to extinction. They're pastoralists. The government's taking their land. They aren't going to be able to do it. And she just went like, whoa, I want to do something about this. And the latest I checked in with her, she's educated Maasai girls and girls from the desert tribes that never even thought about going to upper school, and they are now doctors and they're teachers, and they're going home to their villages.
Right.
The big problem was they couldn't reach the schools. So she set a safe place in Arusha and said, "You come stay here. I'll teach you the school languages. I'll show you how to navigate a city. I will help you study for your tests. I won't teach you anything, but I'll make you believe that you can do this, because I'm going to have Maasai women that barely made it through. They're going to come talk to you."
Yeah.
And in the end, she basically has saved the female half of the Maasai nation from being part of their extinction.
Right. That's awesome. So she saw the possibility in this community, this nation, and then she poured her belief into a segment of that society that probably didn't feel like there was anybody that they were worth anything.
That cared. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like, oh, they're over there, we're over here. Yeah, and even I would even change your wording a tad and say, she saw the unfairness and
Mhm.
checked to see if there was a possibility that she could deal with. And
Yes.
the answer is always no. It's like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to, where do I get the money? And they just do step by step by step, and they do these phenomenal acts of peacemaking.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And
And I love how you've met all these women through, like you mentioned, one of the first ones was, because it was a sister of somebody from backstage at a show who then led you to two people, right? And I think that's what's kind of curious about community nowadays, right? Community is not necessarily who lives next door to you. It's global.
yeah.
And when you reach out, there's usually somebody out there listening or willing to take your hand and go on a journey with you.
And like right now, I feel like it or not, I'm in community with you.
Right.
Just by being on this 400 miles apart podcast.
Right.
Yeah.
Isn't that cool? I mean, we live in this world of, all this technology, right? I've got like two phones and two laptops, and sometimes I think we feel less connected.
Me too.
But when you get to meet somebody with this like-mindedness, or even maybe coming from a completely different background, you can create a connection by listening and talking to others, and then that in turn leads to peace between people.
And I think podcasts are one of the primary vehicles for that.
Yeah.
They take a while. They take 20, 30 minutes. And because you can see people, and because it's always miles and miles apart, it's like, how did that happen? That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really amazing. And I looked at, your website with who you interviewed, and I mean, you had some really varied guests. You mentioned a nun, right? But you had a woman who was, bound for the Olympics, and obviously had tragedy happen in her life, and just this variety of folks that, man, on any given Sunday you wouldn't expect to be on the same page, right? But you've actually put them all in the book.
All in the book together. Yeah.
Love it. And we'll make sure we have a link in the show notes for those of you that might be listening in. As a reminder, the book is Women Peacemakers, What We Can Learn from Them. And we'll make sure we put a link out there, because I think it's really important for people to realize how many female peacemakers there are out there.
That's the cool thing about it. And these are 15 of 60 that I know of that randomly came to me. I mean, how many thousands others are out there?
Yes.
But Marianne, I want to show you one really cool thing about this book. A team of 3 women in my little town, I was in Carbondale, Colorado at the time. They said, we'll help you get this out. I went, good. I don't know. I know how to write. I know how to interview, but I don't know how to publish books. And the graphics lady, or that was the head of this team of 3, basically said, I know you've interviewed all these women, and they've all sent you a photo. She said the photos are varying degrees of fineness.
Yep.
Some of them. But she said, here's how much it's going to cost you if you put their pictures at the beginning of each chapter to print your book. And I went like, you're kidding me. She goes, no, you have one colored picture in a book, then you have to print every page on that quality paper.
Mhm.
So she said, we're going to have a colored cover. Why don't we put all their pictures there? And I said, okay. And she said, I hate losing this thought of seeing them at the beginning of the chapter. She said, let's bid out to see if anybody can take the colored pictures and turn them into something. So here is, I've got to get my pages right here.
Uh-huh.
This is Chito Govera, who is an AIDS orphan from Zimbabwe.
Wow.
Amazing story. This is
Wow. That's so beautiful.
all done with dots. It's like, no kidding. And we had 43 people answer us.
That is amazing. So for those of you that are listening, you've got to come and check out the video. We've got it on Spotify, with the video on Spotify and on YouTube. You got to check it out because you've got this color image. I'm going to try to describe it on the cover of the book. And when you go to the chapter on that individual, that image has been turned into like this great, the black and white with dots that it almost looks like a sketch, and it's so beautiful.
Yep.
Yeah. That's amazing. And it's really cool that you had people within your life that was like, hey, I'm going to step up and help you because I want to, they saw the value in your vision.
Yeah. And otherwise these things would all be sitting as interviews in my desk drawer.
Right.
Yep.
Right. That's amazing. Now, as you know, we talked about this in the green room before we started. A lot of people that are listening to this podcast are in the corporate America space. Mm-hmm. And they might be going like, well, what does that have to do with me? I'm not in Zimbabwe, or I'm not, starting, peace within a country. But, when you're in corporate America, there is a lot of, warfare. There's a lot of politics. Yeah. There's an opportunity to create peace and connectivity. What kind of tips or tricks maybe have you learned through these interviews that you think would apply there?
Well, let me just say, I think the through line between corporate information and peacemaking information is all around the word respect.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I don't care where you are. And we know that these women respected everybody that they were helping. But in the corporate world, it's often, and don't let me overstate, but it's often based on competition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Embedded in competition is winning and losing. Or it's almost traditionally, it's almost the opposite of collaboration.
Correct.
This kind of respect is collaborative respect. And
I love that. Collaborative respect. That is an amazing phrase.
Yeah, it is. And so, Mariana, what I did was I hung up their stories all around the room. And then I said, they all have different stories. They're all in different countries. They've all done different things, but there were some commonalities among what. And so I made, in the book, I have chapter 17 basically says, here are the commonalities with all of these women. And I think they're very applicable to corporate women. I just think women in any arena, politics, corporations, whatever it is, they do it collaboratively.
Yes.
They're just much more prone to do, unless they've had to get where they are by competition. And even then they mellow out.
Yes.
They go like, yep, I'm going to use this top flight place as license to change how we do things. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I've been in corporate America for over 2 decades, and you can definitely see that female leaders even over those past 2 decades have changed
completely.
And it's no longer like us fighting each other, but let's work with each other to lift each other up. But then also let's lift everybody up. It's not like, I'm just going to lift up the women. No, I'm going to lift up everybody on my team. You may not look like me, you may not have the same background as me, but we're a team. And that means I want to raise the water level for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. And so just another hand motion thing. These women don't see a disparity like this, and they don't go like, oh, here, I'll help.
Yes.
And they don't. Right. They also don't do this. The hand motion that exemplifies this, and I think in a lot of corporate settings, is this.
Yes. You're intertwined.
You're working together
Yep.
to teach someone else to empower themselves. You're not empowering them. And so that in the end, you can do this.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that.
Oh, I really love, and because I was working all over the world, the women got it.
Right.
But I will tell you one thing, and I'd like to have your listeners maybe think about this. And that is that when my committee also said, well, okay, it's great to have all these random things, random nominations. You have to have 2 nominations for Peacemaker, one from outside and one from the woman. And the women wouldn't do it.
Wow.
And so the title of my dissertation was Women Peacemakers, the Hidden Side of Peacemaking. They thought it was too pretentious. They would say, I'm a nun, or I'm a skier, or I'm a doctor, or something like that. And this is just what we do. And it's so embedded in what women find naturally to do. And I worked with a kid one time when I was working with Bosnian refugee kids, and he said, Barb, I really think women are going to be the long-term peacemakers in the world. And I said, why? He said, because if they have a child, the moment they conceive, they're in this kind of relationship.
Yes.
And then it goes like this. You give birth to the baby and things like that. So they've got 9 months of practice of thinking that way before they even, go to corporate work or go into motherhood or do things like that. And I thought, how smart that kid was.
That's beautiful. I mean, that's a really beautiful statement from a kid, right? And it's so true. It's so true. Now,
so I'll get back to your question.
No, that was perfect. And you had mentioned too before we started recording and we were in the green room about there's a recipe to stick with a project or a goal. And I love a good recipe. So what does that mean that there's a recipe out there to help people stick with what their mission is?
Well, if you use the play on words, a recipe, like you can't make a loaf of bread by just walking into a bakery. You've got somebody else's bread. So you need ingredients, and you need the order in which those ingredients should be put together. And then you need time to let it rise or whatever it is. There's a whole level. There's a kind of steps, and there's kind of things you would never, for instance, put your compost in the batter. I mean, this is really crazy for me to do. Right. Things you would do and things you would not do. And so that's why I called it the recipe for how to do conscious, active peacemaking.
Okay.
And I can give you some of the ideas in it if you want.
That'd be great.
Okay. So the first 15 chapters of the book are 15 different stories. Every woman I asked the same questions. One question I asked them all was, what advice would you give a young peacemaker or another woman? And so that's all chapter 16. This is chapter 17, which is what I discovered by hanging their papers up. Chapter 18 is a request to the reader and listener to think about themselves as a conscious peacemaker. When have you done it? What might you plan? And so as I read through these things, what I hope people discover is that it's not rocket science.
Right.
It's a bunch of things you probably practice every day in at work or in your family or whatever it is. So I'll read 2 or 3 of them here. And stop me if you want to talk about them. I'll just read through 2 or 3.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So one is be awake when the opportunity comes along.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I already stopped. I wrote like a whole thing on this from I heard a really great sermon, and it was about like the women who are waiting for the master to come back home, and some of them had their oil and some of them didn't for the wedding party, and those that didn't had to go get more oil. Well, the ones that were there, right, they got to go into the party.
That's right.
Right. And so like that, I'm on board with number 1.
That one. Okay. Now, the second item, frankly, got borrowed from one of my beloved and most revered teachers, and he's a male. Mm-hmm. He said, Barb, this is what's really important. Once you decide to take on a project, this is an important step. And it says this: develop your service in response to people's expressed need. When listening for this, make sure you're listening to understand their needs rather than listening to validate the perceived ideas of yourself. So in a corporate world, that
Mhm.
might be, let's say someone comes to you and says, um, I would like to try for this new position. And you go like, great, I'll help you. And here's how I'll help you. And they go like, oh, wait, no, 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 that's too fast, or that it really wouldn't work, or, and so you go like, okay, you tell me, what do you need to keep that,
Mhm.
reach that goal? So that's number 2. Number 3, never lose sight of your goal and never get attached to how you get there, because sure as shooting, you're going to get thrown off the path 50 ways, and you're going to have to remind yourself about your reason for wanting a promotion or whatever it was.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. I love that one too. I, it's like, what's your end goal? When you get too attached to how to get there, you may not get there. But
well,
when all you think about is your vision, is that then it doesn't matter how you get there. It could be left or right, but there's always a way.
yeah, or you can say, I need this kind of salary, and you may get it right off the bat. You may have to go through 3 or 4 different things.
Right.
You may have to change to a new job, somebody else, and they go,
Right.
well, that's funny. That's what I thought I needed to make. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I even had a conversation the other day with someone who I respect greatly. And she and I were talking about, career paths and what do you want to do? And she's like, well, what's your non-negotiables? What don't you want to do?
yep.
Right. And if it's hey, I want to be able to work from home, or I want to only travel 1 week out of the month and no more. Well, that's gonna define
Mhm.
at least like what that next step is, or what that next opportunity is. It may not be what you originally thought it was going to be.
That's right.
Right? And that's okay. I
Yeah.
think we have time for maybe one more trick. You want to share one more,
Yeah,
Barb?
just check one more here. Well, maybe this is good for your audience, maybe not. Pace yourself. Make a
Mhm.
little peace, make a little dinner. Know
Ooh,
that your work might not even be completed in your lifetime. Some of
yeah.
these women have had to find successors for themselves.
Yep.
But this is so true for working mothers or working fathers.
Yes.
It's like, I have to say no to that because I'm depleted.
Yep.
I need to
Yeah.
make a little dinner here.
That is it's so true. Like, I literally made dinner before I had 2 recordings today. So I went, made dinner, did a recording, went and had dinner so that everybody else can stay on their track.
Yeah,
Right. And then I had that break because it's like I need my mental break too,
yeah,
and
exactly.
that's
That's a wise woman and a
that
wise podcast host too.
well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Um This has been really, really interesting to me because, I mentioned to you earlier, I mean, I have 2 kids, so there's constantly trying to create peace between children, sometimes peace between dogs who like to fight, in the middle of everything,
Yeah.
right? But then also, peace with my spouse or at work, right? And if you have one that's off kilter, it ends up having a negative impact on the other.
Yeah. And as you get older, you have to add in peace with my body.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the younger women, me included, we can multitask, we can do all these things, we get complimented for it. And then later on, you go like, well, my brain's still working that fast, but my ankles aren't working that fast, or my
Right.
back isn't doing what it should. Yeah.
Yeah, having that grace with yourself, not only with others. It's
Yep.
important. It's important.
Exactly.
So if people are interested in learning more about you, your story, your journey, your book, can you share with the group? I know we have here on the screen, but for those of you who are listening, what's some of the best ways for people to connect with you or to go get your book?
You know what? I don't even have my personal one there. I would say go look at the website, which is
Okay.
barbechamblissauthor.com. It has an
Okay.
author's page and things like that, and it gives you more information about how to connect with me. There's a little section called Media Kit, and it's got different contact things. That might be
That's
the best way.
that's awesome. I wrote down. I'm a big note writer, so I'm constantly scribbling. But
Me
I
too.
wrote. I mean, I end up typing it so I could read it later. But while I'm in the moment, but I wrote down some notes that really resounded with me. Respect is the key word. Collaborative respect is what gets you there.
That's right.
Um, your recipe to stick with to get to your goal, or you have to have the right ingredients. That could be your skill set, the right tools in the right order with the right amount of time. And when you have those, then you're able to actually move forward. And I love this whole listen to understand versus validating your own idea. I
Yeah.
have been in a lot of meetings and I am guilty of this probably every single day. Listening to understand will get you so much further with your team, with your leaders, and on any initiative you're working on. And pace yourself, because we're not always good at that.
I'll give you one more really quick one that I think is applicable in your case, which is when you want to criticize, get curious.
You want to criticize, get curious.
Yeah, and when you're going like, no, that's not that, that's a dumb idea or something like that, you go like, could you tell me more about that, please?
Yes. I love that.
Yeah.
That's really, I need to remember that with my kids. That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, and
Yeah.
I learned that, you learn that by being a kid where people don't listen and you go like, well, I just got to learn how to be louder and faster and things like that. Yeah.
And that's not always the case.
And
Right?
when I do talk about peacemaking in corporations and businesses, that's the one so many people go like, oh yeah, we've really needed that.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Barb, this has been so amazing. Thank you so much for being our guest this evening.
Oh, well, you've introduced me to a podcast that I will now listen to.
Well, that sounds, I appreciate that. I will gladly take another listener.
Okay, great. Yeah, put me down.
Thank you for tuning into Might in Motion. If you learned something about motivation, momentum, mindfulness, or might, please like, comment, and share. Thank you.